Hello. Today's stories come from r/MaliciousCompliance. We've got 3 stories today. Our first story is the shortest, but packs the biggest punch and has topped the charts this week. It reads, Prove it? Love to. A while back, my agency was about to deploy a new financial management system, which had been developed in house to dovetail with some of our pre existing systems. I was part of a combo tech management group tasked with reviewing the new software. After a short hands on demo, we were on the receiving end of a presentation by the developer, let's call him Tim, with whom I had a bit of not great history. And the more we got into the technical nuts and bolts of the financial management system, the more apparent it was Tim was leaning heavily on security through obscurity, oddball data structures, deeply recursive API calls, etc. Mid presentation, Tim and I got into it a little bit. Tim saying his structures were so arcane nobody could be able to trace the course of his calls. Me calling BS, saying for a sufficiently skilled programmer, the question wouldn't be if, but when. Tim calling that BS, etc., etc. You get the idea. After a few exchanges, an irritated Tim said, You think it would be so easy to crack? Prove it. At that point, I backed off to let Tim finish his presentation. But while Tim did that, I cracked open my notebook and went back into the demo system. About 20 to 30 minutes later, when Tim was in the final Q&A phase of his presentation, I re-raised my concerns. Tim reasserted his confidence in his system's security, at which point I asked, So you're saying you would have no qualms trusting this system to protect your personal data? And slid a piece of paper across the conference table to Tim. Tim looked at the paper, then back at me, then back to the paper again as his face turned beet red. This, of course, did not go unnoticed by the other attendees, who looked curiously, and those who actually knew me, smirkingly, at me. And not wanting to disappoint, I asked him if he wanted to share the contents of the note with everyone. A negative headshake was his only response. One of the other attendees who knew me said, Okay, what's the fracking deal? We were a pretty informal bunch, but all I said was, It's Tim's call. Either he can read out loud what's on that piece of paper, or he can explain what it is and why he doesn't want to. Painted into a corner, Tim had no choice. He mumbled, It's me. You see, while Tim was continuing his presentation, I had gone back into the demo, cracked my way down to programmer mode, and sussed through the data structures enough to get to the financial management system's personnel file. I'd figured Tim was the sort to use himself as a test entry in the file, and I was right. His security through obscurity held out for less than a half hour, and on that piece of paper, nothing much, just Tim's social security number. Afterwards, the group decided some redesign was necessary before the system went into testing for production deployment, unanimously, including Tim. He moved on shortly after, by the way. Additional info. This was back around 92 or 93, which raises a couple of probably relevant points. Networks weren't very robust back then, when they existed at all, so our dev team did almost all of our dev work on agency-furnished laptops. That way, when we had to travel to do field support, we could take our tools with us. Identity theft was a thing back then, but not nearly to the degree it is in the internet age. When Tim plugged his dev system into the conference room LAN to do the demo, the thought of personal information exposure probably never even crossed his mind. Or if it did, Tim was certain nobody could get through his security. Truth to tell, at the time, I didn't think it was Tim's actual social security number. I just figured it to be a piece of data he'd easily recognize as something I'd had to have pulled from his system's files. It was Tim's reaction, which surprisingly confirmed it was the real deal. At this point in time, I was the senior Tier 3 technical support analyst in my regional office and had been doing advanced IT support, remote and on site, of our in house software suite at field locations for something like 7 years or so, which is largely why I had a seat at the presentation table in the first place. The sort of convoluted hybrid relational network DB data structures Tim thought conferred a degree of security, running down those pointer paths wasn't really all that much different from troubleshooting activities I did several times a week for our field sites to resolve DB pointer corruption issues. But Tim's background did not include any degree of field support experience, so he likely wasn't familiar with that particular skill set. I don't think one's knowledge about the ins and outs of these IT references impacts the level of appreciation for this story. Tim was arrogant and apparently a tad ignorant, challenged OP, and OP rose to the occasion. Let's check out some other examples of the flaw with this design philosophy. Artur50 said, I'm reminded of the LifeLock guy who was so sure his service was bulletproof he posted his social security number in his advertisements. To nobody's surprise, he got his identity stolen a bunch of times. Someone replied, "Similar politician in my country said no one can do anything with just his ID number. Didn't get his identity stolen though, only locked out from government services from the number of people trying to hack him but failing two-factor authentication." Someone else said, "That's like having a safety demo for a chain and you're standing under 10,000-pound weight, like, see, nothing can go wrong, only for someone to be like, stand 3 feet to the side, please." Pulls out single bolt, causing weight to slam down. Safety guy. So now we're going to have a lesson in testing before showing. Some people have too much faith in A, their own work, and B, other people's work. I never sign my name to someone else's work without checking it first. Reverend James added, or like a physical security company showing off a very sophisticated biometric lock at DEF CON with welded seams and no keyholes to pick, only to have some butthole smack it with a rubber mallet, causing the spring-loaded bolt to momentarily retract just enough for him to pop the door open. The zombie cat said, "I would reject any system designed to use arcane, oddball data structures, deeply recursive API calls, etc., as a form of security, even if it managed to provide adequate protection. Too difficult to maintain and update." OP replied, "That was my point entirely. Security through obscurity is a myth. Just because something seems obscure to the developer doesn't mean it's obscure to anybody else. Humiliating Tim wasn't my goal, I swear. Just a bonus." Our second story comes from the land of Kiwis and has just had another update. New Mangaler. You're just a driver. Stop complaining and just do it as it's written. I started working as a HGV driver working in multi-temp delivery a few months ago. We deliver food, drinks, and consumables to commercial kitchens such as pubs, hotels, schools, etc. Each day, we get given a loaded lorry and a route of between 15 and 20 drops to deliver to. Most days, we get back to the depot about 9 to 10 hours after we set out in the morning. The route is very important, as the lorry will be loaded with that route in mind, delivering to School A first, then School A's cages will be loaded last, blocking access to the next drop's cages. Over the years, the peculiarities of each drop location and the routes have been fine-tuned by the drivers to make delivering the whole route easier and faster. We're salaried, not hourly, so the sooner we get back, the better. A few examples. You don't want to be turning up at a school to try and deliver during the school run time. The roads are blocked with parents dropping their kids off. It's a pure nightmare. Get there early or skip it until after 9 a.m. Pub A and Hotel B may only be a quarter of a mile from each other, but there is a low bridge and a railway line in between. So to get an 18-ton lorry from A to B, you need to do a 6-mile detour. Pub C's kitchen crew don't start work until 10 a.m., and there will be no one on site to accept the delivery if you go there before then. Garden Center D and Farm Shop E are on opposite sides of a very busy dual carriageway, so if you try to deliver D, then E, you will be stuck waiting for a gap in traffic to get across for a long time. Far better to deliver to D on the way out on the route and E on the way back home. The routes do change a bit with load limits and order quantities, but on the whole, they have been pretty good with minimal having to rearrange on the fly and unload cages to get onto the cages you need for the drop. Enter new manager Bob. Bob has never driven a lorry or worked as a delivery driver. Bob likes computers and is all about efficiency. Saving fuel and routes need to be distance efficient as possible. Bob decides that the routes need to be changed. He uses a lovely program on his PC and plugs in all the addresses of drops and lets the program work things out for him. Bob forgets to tell the program that the delivery vehicles weigh 18 ton and are 12 feet 6 inches high. First day the new routes are released, the drivers are going, "What the F? That makes no sense." And go to see Bob to find out what the F is going on and tell him how it's just not going to work. Bob's answer is rather dismissive, calling us just drivers and to do it as written. He's the manager and he knows best. A lot of work has gone into these new routes, and they start as written the next day and must be complied with. There's lots of swearing and complaining in the crew room until someone points out that Bob is afternoon duty manager the next day. The duty manager has to stay until the last lorry gets back to depot and then sort out any issues with the day's deliveries, so it's not only us that will have a crap day. Since we have to do them as written, let's all just do that and show him just how much he has screwed up. The fallout. I was lucky. My route only took 13 hours instead of the usual 10. I got back to base at 6 p.m. My refueling was about 20 liters of diesel more than usual. Who would have thought sitting in traffic with the engine and refrigeration units running burnt so much fuel? But I completed my route. I was one of the first drivers back at base. As HGV drivers, we have strict duty time and drive time rules we legally have to comply with. So, as drivers get towards their 15-hour duty time limit or 10-hour drive time limit, they turn back to base even if they hadn't completed their run. Apparently, by 9 p.m., there was a queue of lorries parked up on the road trying to get into the depot, and drivers were walking up to Bob and handing him their keys as legally they weren't allowed to work anymore. The mandatory 1 hour total breaks and over 12-hour shift don't count towards duty time. There is also a mandatory 11-hour break between shifts that as a driver you can get into serious trouble for breaching, so all the drivers who would normally have been turning up for work at 5 a.m. couldn't start until 8 a.m. at the earliest. I turned up at 5 a.m., and Bob had only left when the morning duty manager turned up at 3 a.m. I spent the day shunting, unloading, and refueling as the loaders and pickers tried to get lorries ready to get some of the routes out. The old routes. The rest of the drivers turned up 11 hours after they finished and sat in the crew room drinking tea waiting for their lorries. Everyone who could agreed to do Saturday morning overtime, usually paid at time and a half, but as double time Sunday rate instead so that drivers would say yes to get the deliveries missed out to the customers. The office crew spent all day on the phones apologizing and rearranging deliveries. Bob never showed up for his shift. I can't wait until Monday. Anyone want to place bets on if it's old routes or Bob's routes? Update. Minor update from one of the drivers in today who just called me. The depot manager, Bob's boss, came in all day today and he's meant to be on holiday for another week. Loud, angry telephone conversations have been overheard happening through his closed office door, and he is not known for raising his voice. Next week's duty manager roster has been taken down. Tomorrow's duty manager will be the depot manager, which apparently is something that hasn't happened in years. Rumor mill is saying that Bob was only supposed to produce a proposal for new routing and never had permission for it to go live. Next week's routes are definitely back to the old ones. What a classic trope. New manager who has never actually done the job thinks he knows best. Well, totally bit him in the butt. On to the comments for some additional details from OP. D1133 said, "Love it. I want to hear the fallout." OP replied, "First bit of fallout. The morning manager just called me. There's not enough drivers to do today's runs. I've just agreed to go in tomorrow at double time plus a day in lieu. Works for me as I had Wednesday off as a holiday for an appointment. So now it isn't using up my holiday entitlement. Bob isn't answering his phone." Someone else added, "Do the job. Don't be Bob." Karakian1 said, "When I read that the height of the vehicles wasn't taken into account, I thought that there was going to be something about not being able to complete a route because of a low bridge you don't fit under." Disrupt NZ said, "I was already hoping for a link to a video from 11foot8.com to really underline that F up." Someone else added, "It's okay. The lorries are only 12-inch 6 foot." Six Ledger said, "I have been the passenger in a truck that was marked as 13-foot high that went under a 12-foot bridge. It was a local bridge, and the driver knew it well, and he knew he had several inches of room to work with. This works great until the authority resurfaced the road. I don't think he works for the company anymore." Someone said, "I don't know. Bob sounds like a 'the beatings will continue until morale improves' kind of mangler." Irate Bugs asked, "Is mangler British for manager?" Someone else said, "More often seen in the collective term, manglement." Our last story is titled, "I'm a Renter? Understood." So let's start with some context. My mom and I moved into my grandma's house when I was 5. My godmother already lived with my grandma, so she was also part of the household. Firstly, my aunt has never done anything with her life. She liked to say she had to take care of my grandma, but my grandma was a feisty old Mexican lady who happily handled everything herself all the way until she got cancer in her very last year of life. She used my grandma as a crutch to never get a job or really any source of income, ever. My mom and grandma paid for this house every year and kept it up and running. Fast forward to me being 22. My mom died of cancer. We knew my grandma wouldn't be able to afford the house herself, so my wife and I stayed to help because we felt bad leaving right after my mom died. So for 2 to 3 years, we handled the house taxes, the electricity bill. When the air conditioner broke, we paid to fix that. And I also gave my grandma my old car when I got a new one, so my aunt could take her to her doctor appointments and whatnot. I did all of this because I was taught to be there for my family by my mom. After those 2 to 3 years, my grandma died. So now it was only our income and my aunt needing to be supported by us. Again, this is how I was taught family takes care of each other. We felt bad leaving my aunt after my grandma died, so we stayed again. Bought food for her, cooked for her. I even handled all the dishes and house cleaning. I mowed the lawn. I handled any insect issues the house was having, even gave her our recyclables so she could have at least a little money for stuff. So it finally gets to a point where I confront her and say, "Look, my mom helped pay for this house. Now I am too. My wife and I want to help you." Notice I said help and not take the house away from you. Make the house nice again. We want to get new carpet, fix the broken windows, etc. For this, though, we need you to co own the house with us. We aren't going to put our money into it just for you to sell it and we end up screwed over. Or, also, if you just happen to die young, the house would just go to the bank. That's a whole other long story, but it's what will happen. She, of course, said no, but only because she wants the house to herself and I'm her ownership. She's very, very greedy and selfish, like that about everything. So we end up arguing, and I say how we stayed because we cared and wanted to help. We want to continue helping. However, we can't just blindly funnel money into your home when we need to make sure our living situation is secure. During said argument, I say how we've been nothing but caring and don't want to take the house. We just want to work with her. Again, no. So I start to get frustrated and I say, "How can you be like this to me, especially when both my mother and I have paid for this house? We put more into it than she ever has. I don't feel owed, but I feel that us working together and owning the house together would be fair, since she doesn't even pay for any of it." I said how we stayed after Grandma died to help her. Her exact words were, "Well, you should have just left." That hurt a lot because all that was just for nothing, not even appreciation. Fast forward to another argument, and I bring up how I feel it was wrong of her to take advantage of my mom the way she did. There's way more context to that than above, but again, whole other long story. When I say I think it was wrong, her words were, "Well, take it up with your mother." That broke me because I was super close to my mom and she had only been dead for like 2 years, so it was still very painful. That was my breaking point. I could not help somebody this selfish and hurtful. I told her that was awful of her to say that. That this house is ours just as much as it is hers. She says, "Christian, you guys are renters." Cue malicious compliance. I say, "Oh, we're renters? Okay." So I started going by doing exactly what me and my grandmother agreed upon when we moved in. I paid the electric bill and the house taxes. That's it. Mowing the lawn? Sorry, wasn't part of my lease. Handling the insect infestation? Nope, landlord's issue. Cleaning your dishes and the 800 pictures you have on the walls filled with dust? Yeah, not my problem. My wife and I care for ourselves now. Her house is going more and more to ruin. Windows have broken more. The air conditioning broke again. The shower broke. Water heater broke and damaged the living room and walls. Termites in all the wood. All not my problems. My wife and I are currently in the process of finding a place and moving out. We might not even tell her when we do move and just up and leave, letting her sit in her own filth. I mean, it's not in my lease that I need to give a notice. Edit. Thank you so much, all, for the support. I still get that guilty feeling when I leave, but I need to realize that it's just the parasite trying to keep me as her host. Edit 2. For everybody giving advice about taking ownership, I've looked into it somewhat. With adverse possession, I have everything I'd need except one part of it, which is I'd need a paper that shows I had unreasonable doubt to believe it is in fact my house. She would have had to give me a lease or a paper showing she put me on the house, even if she just forged it, in order to be able to actually get the adverse possession. She would rather die to the plague than utter the words, "It's your house too." I will possibly reach out to a lawyer, though, to see what we can do. We had mail come one time as well that was to the homeowner, but one of my uncle's names was on it, so I'm going to City Hall when I'm paid to buy a copy of the current title or whatever so I can see who is actually on it. Edit 3. She asked me about 2 weeks ago if I could give her $480 to help with the house insurance. I said I don't have it. She later asked my wife, and my wife is a very helpful woman. She told my aunt that if my aunt applies for government assistance, actually takes part in cleaning her part, and is generally helpful, then she would give it to her. Aunt texts wife last night saying, "I don't want to apply for assistance right now. Does this mean you're not giving me the money?" Rocking infuriating. Edit 4. So, as far as the title on the house, here's the story. Back in 2000, our city was declaring the house almost like a historical landmark because the house had been in the city for so many years. It was very beat up, though, so they offered to literally rebuild it from the ground up. They knocked down the old one and put up the new one. So apparently, the agreement with the city is after the current title holders die or sell or whatever, they own the house. If she sells, she has to pay what she owes the city first, which with zero income, she can't do. Now, I don't know all the details on this, so I'm unsure how true it is. However, it does make me want to deal with it even less because if I get a lawyer and go through all these hoops just for them to say, nope, it's the city's, then it was all pointless. OP is totally being taken advantage of. Love that he wants to support family, and I think it's amazing that he stands by this principle. But at a certain point, caring for his aunt is limiting his ability to secure the future of his family. Definitely time to move on. OP answers some questions in the comments. Let's check them out. Jetta said, "Stop paying the taxes. That isn't what renters do directly. And move out." OP replied, "That's exactly what we're doing. Taxes are due in December, and we're going to be out next month." Someone asked, "Who owns the title to the house?" OP replied, "It was in my grandma's name, and then she added my aunt. However, it's a well known and talked about fact that she made it so that when she passed, ownership was to be split between each of her 6 children. Unfortunately, this was never actually written down in a will or anything, so it's currently only under my aunt's. I understand the ownership of it all, and I understand I can't take it from her, but I think we all expected her to honor that wish of my grandmother's. Seems like she never will." Relative Acadia said, "Yep, leave and don't look back. My mom fell for something similar with her sister who was a paraplegic. My mom took care of her day in and day out. Retired early so Auntie wouldn't have to go into a nursing home. She was supposed to give my mom some jewelry and stuff from their mother. Delay, delay, delay until my aunt died. In the will, left everything to my uncle, who didn't do crap and left nothing to my mom. I still like to think of her burning in hell. Don't fall for it. Just save yourselves. Those kind of people are lost causes. And when social services shows up at your door, tell them you want nothing to do with her. She made her bed. Time for her to lie in it." Wings of Sky added, "There's so many people that want to screw you over. You help them and help people. Then you're the idiot." If you've enjoyed the story and would like to hear more, consider liking, subscribing, and leaving a comment. Thanks, and bye for now.